It's the election to end all elections. 714 million potential votes and weeks of voting to find a new government for the world's biggest democracy. Who will shape India's future, and just how do you conduct a full, free and fair vote on such a grand scale? This is Inside Story. Hello there, I'm Kamal Santamaria. You know, there really aren't enough superlatives when it comes to the scale of these Indian elections. The world's largest democracy, a huge population of around 1 billion people, 700 million of them eligible to vote over a month-long period at any one of over 800,000 polling stations. It is logistically extraordinary, and with so many voters across such a large landmass, the marathon elections have to be held in 5 phases. They start April 16, they do not end until May 13. The vote count, though, will start 3 days after that, and then if it wasn't already, it's a waiting game to find out how any potential coalitions might be created. However, one of the things about India's elections is that it is almost a vote for coalitions. Even though Indians will still cast an individual ballot for an individual party, there are what you could call pre-existing alliances, 3 of them, in fact. The United Progressive Alliance, or UPA, was formed after the 2004 election. It brings together parties which support the Congress Party. It is the current government, and the incumbent Prime Minister, Dr. Manmohan Singh, is the chosen candidate. The NDA, the National Democratic Alliance, was formed 6 years before the UPA, an alliance of Hindu nationalist parties led by Bharatiya Janata Party, and currently in opposition. The group's candidate, LK Advani, comes from that party, the BJP. And then there's the Third Front, a group made of many communist groups who form an alliance of regional parties. It's a pretty new group, branded as an alternative to the 2 major blocs, with Mayawati touted as the likely candidate. Well, Al Jazeera correspondent Barnaby Phillips is covering the election from the state of Kerala. He offers us now this assessment of an extraordinary vote.
I think an Indian election perhaps really is a series of small battles taking place in different parts of this diverse country. It's very difficult to talk about one struggle going on. It's very difficult to catch an electoral wind sweeping across this country that's favouring one party, favouring the right, favouring the left. For example, down here in Kerala, there is a particular fight between a communist government, which is in power, which has been in power in this state on and off ever since the late 1950s. And if you drive around the capital, Thiruvananthapuram, as we have been doing, you'll see the hammer and sickle and the red flag flying everywhere. And they're resisting a push from Congress, who are trying to take the state back. So the struggle in Kerala bears no relation to what might be happening elsewhere. One of the reasons why we're seeing such a fractured situation, where politics is dividing along caste lines, along religious lines, is because the big 2 parties seem to be in decline, by which I mean Congress and the BJP. 20 years have passed since these parties could command a parliamentary majority by themselves, and it would be a major shock if either one of them were to realise a majority this time. So what is most likely is that those 2 parties will emerge as the 2 largest, and then they will try and build coalition partners which they will need to take a majority in Parliament. So perhaps it's the action after the election which will be just as interesting, just as intriguing as the election process itself. But for now, from the warm, balmy and humid southern state of Kerala, back to you, Kamal, in Doha.
There you go, Barnaby Phillips in Kerala for us. With us now, our guests for today in New Delhi, Prananjoy Gutha Thakurta, a political analyst and author of the book Divided We Stand, India in a Time of Coalitions. Also in New Delhi, Anil Padmanabhan is the editor of Mint, a leading Indian financial newspaper. And rounding out our panel in Washington, D.C. is Rani Mullen, a professor of government at the College of William and Mary in Virginia, also a visiting scholar at Johns Hopkins University. Thank you all for your time today, for joining us in Inside Story. Mr. Prananjoy in New Delhi, I'll come to you first. We talk about this, the world's biggest democratic exercise. As I said, all those superlatives. In the end, when we talk about free and fair and full elections, does India's election live up to that lofty title?
I would say by and large it does. I mean, yes, we are indeed the world's largest democracy. Hopefully we'll soon be called the world's best democracy as well. In certain respects, the way the polling system works is superior to many, many other countries, including the United States of America. For instance, you know, these 800,000 polling booths, all of them have electronic voting machines. That kind of minimizes the possibilities of, you know, manipulation or rigging. I'm not saying Indian democracy is perfect. You know, I mean, there are flaws galore. But if you look at the way elections have evolved, and this is the 15th time India is going to the polls, I would say by and large, all those superlatives, all those fancy phrases that you've been using, by and large, India does live up to that reputation of being not just the world's largest democracy, soon to become one of the world's best.
That's optimism there in New Delhi. Let me go to Rani Mullen in Washington, D.C. Do you expect this vote to be more of a reflective vote or a looking forward vote? What I'm meaning is, would it be voters looking back and thinking, well, we had 5 good years of economic growth, there is a crisis now, but we had some good years there? Or are they looking forward thinking, who's going to actually get us out of this economic crisis right now?
Well, I think, you know, there are two things. Voters do have the past years in mind, prosperity unlike they've ever had before, good economic growth rates. But there's the global environment of economic slowdown. But, you know, in India, even though these are national elections, we're really talking about 543 mini-elections. People in India do vote on local issues. As a famous American politician said, all politics are local, and that definitely is the case in India. So I think it will more be voters will look at what the issues are in their state, in their district, and that will be a greater determinant rather than the larger issue of economics or security.
And with that in mind, do the names, the personalities, the Manmohan Singhs, the LK Advanis, do they play such a major role as they would perhaps in other countries' elections, or the big personalities would?
Well, I think you do not have both these personalities playing such a large role. You know, there is a generational issue. Both of these leaders are, you know, in their late 70s, early 80s. So we're talking about, you know, people who are beyond the average life expectancy in India. And there is talk within both of those parties who the new generational leaders will be. Perhaps Rahul Gandhi for Congress, the Chief Minister of Gujarat, Modi, has national ambitions too. So rather than focusing just on these individuals, it is a parliamentary democracy. Individuals matter less than in a presidential system as here in the United States. And I think there is a recognition that, you know, in a coalition government, which is very likely, it will not only be about the Prime Minister, but also the others in the coalition who will drive the
let's
issues.
talk about those coalitions with Anil Padmanabhan in New Delhi. At the start of the show, I sort of listed 3, I won't quite call them predetermined coalitions, but loosely predetermined. Where's the kingmaker this time around? Is there a kingmaker, or is Indian politics just getting quite fragmented, really?
It is getting fragmented, but eventually there will be a kingmaker, and that will come forth around mid-May when the results come out. But I would at this point, pointers are towards some kind of a third front formation which will include the Congress. So the kingmakers in this obviously are going to be Sonia Gandhi on one side and Prakash Karat on the other, who's keeping this bound together as the leader of the left coalition.
Do you expect the third front to be important this time? As we said before, it's a new bloc. We know more about the other 2 blocs. Tell us a little bit about this new one.
Okay, the third front is primarily a kind of non-Congress, non-BJP coalition exercise. The polity is fractured so incredibly this time. So obviously the smaller parties see a much greater role for themselves. And the left, sensing this, has begun to coalesce this movement around itself. very early, sometime in November. And they have kind of a broad coalition together, but not enough to form a government of its own. So that's why I mentioned that they would need the Congress in some kind of effort if they have to go ahead and form the government.
Folks, stick around. We're going to take a quick break in Inside Story. When we come back, we're going to look further into the real individual specific challenges which would face any new Indian government. We're back in a moment.